Welcome to A Documentary Life with warring documentary filmmaker Charlie Strickler. That's me. And thank you to our listeners on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. For those of you on YouTube, you'll be able to watch the video, and for the rest of you, you'll get to listen to my lovely voice. Welcome to episode number 3. I hope you enjoy it. Today we'll be talking about how to make a full-length documentary all by yourself. Yes, it can be done, I promise. Just listen to me. Let's get into it. When people ask me what I do, I tell them I'm a documentary filmmaker. Technically, that's true. What is also true is that for the last 2 years, I've been a travel agent, an accountant, a fundraiser, a logistics coordinator, an IT manager, a gear technician, an editor, social media marketer, and occasionally a filmmaker. Because making documentaries is just one job. It's 20 jobs, disguised as one. So what are we going to talk about today? The idea of the one-man band. That's what I do. That's all I've ever done in all of my films, including Outcast Nation, when actually I had one person to help me. That's just because I'm getting old and I can't carry all this gear anymore. But the idea of being able to make a full-length, broadcast-quality documentary all by yourself, I promise you, it's completely doable. Just listen to me. Let's get into it. So, what is a one-man band? And it's a term everybody uses, they kick it around, but technically it means that you are everything. You're the producer, you're the director, if there's some writing, you're the writer, you're the editor, you're doing everything. And the reason for the one-man band is because there's no money for documentary film. I have never made a dime making documentary films. I'm not proud of it, and I'm working towards that. Hopefully that's going to happen at some point. But that's not why we make documentary films. And anybody who's watched my YouTube channel or anything I've said, we make documentary films because we have to tell the stories. And we tell the stories in any manner we can, with whatever camera we can, with whatever gear we can. And we drive places. I drove to Michigan for 16 hours to get 3 interviews. Literally, from New York to Michigan in the snow. I drove to Toronto to get interviews. This is what we do. Because not doing this is not an option. So, the one-man band is basically you doing everything because we can't afford to pay anybody else. So, the skill set for being a one-man band documentary filmmaker means you need to be able to shoot, write, do interviews, edit, schedule, budget, all that stuff. You need those skills. And mostly because if you're doing it by yourself, I can't stress how important development and pre-production are. So for the sake of expedience, let's get into development and pre-production. And yes, these are important things on any movie, but when it comes to one-man banding a documentary, this is so important. And we'll start. So let's talk about development. What is development? Now, development, if you're in LA, development means that you've spoken to somebody who's spoken to somebody else about the possibility of speaking to somebody else about getting a movie made.
Well, I certainly can't direct or act.
No, you just be in development.
And what's that?
Shepherding projects, developing them.
I thought a guy writes a movie and a guy directs a movie.
Sure.
And in between there are designers and technicians and actors.
Yes.
So tell me what I do again?
Development.
That's development. In documentary film, that's not development. In documentary film, development is literally, you get your idea, whatever that idea is. And for me, I come up with an idea, I start thinking about that idea by myself. I'm not having meetings. Generally, what I'll do is I'll write a synopsis. Everybody has followed me on YouTube. You know I did an entire a video about synopsis and how important the synopsis is to your project. The reason why for a documentary the synopsis is so important, it will help you really not just strengthen your idea, but where that idea is going and who you need to reach out to. What experts do you need? What organizations do you need? That's all in your synopsis because you're going to be thinking about reaching out to people. Well, you need to know who you're reaching out to, why you're reaching out to them, and why should they say yes. These are 3 pretty important questions to ask. This all happens in development. So basically, you get your idea, get your list of people who are important to that particular story. I like to start with like the people that are on the front line of whatever issue it is I'm covering. So like with Rising Tides, the first people I reached out to was the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and the Citizens Climate Lobby. There are two huge organizations that are on the forefront of global warming and climate change. And both organizations, not only did they say yes, they were happy to reach out to all these other people for me and make introductions. So next thing you know, I've got I've got climate scientists, I've got whistleblowers, I've got climate denier specialists in my film because of the people I reached out to. And those are the people who know everybody else. That's the other thing. Like on After Never Again, I reached out to a couple of pretty well-known public Jewish figures, and after that, the floodgates opened. I've got over 45 interviews in this film now, and it's insane. Find the people that are on the forefront of your issue, whatever it is. If it's a political thing, find the politicians. If it's an activist thing, find those activists, the loudest ones. And look, they're all on YouTube. I hate the interwebs, but they're yeah, but they're all on YouTube. And you can find places where they've spoken, things they've written. Because what you want to do is you want to be well-versed in whoever you're reaching out to. So when you do that initial reach-out email, you're going to say, hey, you know what? I'm Charlie Spickler, and I'm making this documentary about such and such, and I've read your work. I've seen you, out front talking about this. I think your voice would be really important to my film. And we're being honest. We're not selling a used car. We're making a film that is highlighting whatever the cause is that they're championing. And look, make no mistake, documentaries, while are supposed to be objective, and we try to be objective, and we try to step back and show every side of an argument, but nobody starts a documentary because they were, wishy-washy or blasé about the subject they're covering. You make the documentary about something that you find important. So whoever you're reaching out to is finding that same thing as important as you are. So you're not just blowing smoke. You're like, I believe in what you're saying. I believe you'll be important to my movie. And so know who you're reaching out to. And 9 times out of 10, if they are passionate about the subject, they'll want to see a documentary about that subject. It's happened on every movie that I've made so far, including After Never Again right now. So the first part of development is figuring out if your project has legs. So what that means is that are the people that you reach out to that are important to the film. If they say yes and they want to talk to you, then you can move to the next step. If you can't get anybody in that world to talk to you, then, you might not be able to make this film. I've had a couple of films. In fact, right before we made Outcast Nation last year, I was working on another, it was heavy. Just to say, it was a heavy subject, and I was talking to a couple of organizations that were involved in the subject. And when I told them I wanted to make a documentary about this, they were all very happy. They go, "Oh, how can we help you? We'll get you involved to this person, this," and it was a lot of talk because when we got closer to I'd love to come and interview you. You guys said you were going to help get raise money for the film. I got ghosted, like seriously ghosted, which never happened to me before. Now, luckily, that ghosting led to making Outcast Nation, which is now on PBS, and that's all good. But if you can't get those people to talk to you, then you may be looking at a film that can't be made and doesn't have the legs that we hope for. But let's be positive. You reach out to the people. They are like, oh yeah, please, keep in touch. Let me know, when you're going to be shooting, where you're going to be shooting. And so once you've amassed like 3 or 4 people who are important in that area, the next thing you got to do is figure out what your schedule is going to be and what your budget's going to be. Because you can't have a budget without a schedule, and you can't have a movie without a budget. So let's talk about schedule. Now, when you make a schedule for a regular narrative film, you have a first AD who makes a schedule, takes the script, breaks down the script to however many shoot days it takes to shoot the 90 pages or whatever it is, and there's your schedule. And then then you send it to your line producer or UPM, and they go ahead and look at the schedule and look at what's in need, and then they make their budget based on the schedule and the production. That's not what we do. That's never been what we do. What we're looking at is scheduling interviews with people or events or conferences or whatever it is that do not line up in any way, shape, or form. I can just tell you right now, on After Never Again, I just finished shoot day 31, and none of those days were more than 5 days in a row in any one place, okay? So I've been traveling around the United States and Canada since the beginning of March. 31 days in different places. And let me tell you, that's not easy. So what you need to do is, let's say that the documentary that you're making is local, okay? So you have access. Like when we made Outcast Nation last year, I was home by 6 o'clock almost every night because all of our interviews and all of our events and everything happened in New York City, which was the first time that ever happened for me. Rising Tides, I was all over the Eastern Seaboard. Trumpism, I was all over the Eastern Seaboard. Outcast Nation, we were home. We went in the morning, shot stuff, went to different homeless shelters and stuff, and did our thing, and then we were home. After Never Again, I've been traveling for 3 months. So if you're doing something that's local, and I suggest that your first documentary be local, because it will make your life much easier. So then what you need to do is just clump your interviews as best as you can. For me, if I'm driving, Michigan notwithstanding, if it's less than a 3-hour drive, then to me, that's a one-day gig. I drive down, and I drive back, no hotel. Also, we avoid flying at all costs. We had to fly to California a couple of weeks ago, so we had like 10, 12 interviews out in California, which we could not drive to from New York. And our interviews down in Florida had to fly. But Toronto, Michigan, D.C., Virginia, those are all drivable for me. And yes, so we don't have to pay for a hotel, and we never fly. So clump your interviews so that you can bang out 2 or 3 on the same day or on the same 2 days. That way, you're cutting down on time, you're cutting down on expenses, because every dime that you spend should be going into your film. I wrote a book, which a lot of people know. It like skyrocketed on Reddit. It's called Documentary Filmmaking 101. And the thing I talk about most is getting that low budget film made. And my example is a $5,000 budget. And that includes a camera, a really good microphone, and basically a little bit of editing gear and travel. That to me, it can be done. So if you're frugal, you can make your first broadcast quality documentary film for under $5,000. And that is all goes into pre-production after you figured out whether you have a movie or not. So development, you get your idea. Does it have legs? Have you reached out to the people that can help you make the film? If all those answers are yes, well, guess what? We move into pre-production. So pre-production on a documentary film is almost, well, maybe even more important than development, because now that you know you have a movie, now you have to make the movie. And pre-production means that, okay, we're going to take all the information we have, everybody that's agreed to be in the movie, okay, whatever locations that we're going to shoot in have agreed for us to shoot there. Sometimes it works out great, sometimes it doesn't. We had the amazing offer to shoot all of our interviews in L.A. at the Simon Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance. It was amazing. And they were helpful, and they were gracious, and they gave us a whole room to shoot in. We left everything set up. That never happens. I can tell you right now. 6 documentaries in, that's never happened to me. I've had to rent stuff, or we try to shoot in people's offices or living rooms. You never rent a space if we don't have to. So find places that you can shoot for free. That's part of pre-production. So you've got all your information. You know who you're shooting, where you're shooting. Now, you need to wrangle the cats. So figure out what your schedule is. Like with me, once I know we're going, like After Never Again, I knew in January that this was happening. So I gave myself 2 months of pre-production. I started scheduling interviews for March. And then, every week I was going someplace or I was coming back from someplace, because I had people that were all over the country and in Canada. But if you've got people that are local, give yourself, a month, a 2-month leeway so people will be available. You'd be surprised how many people who, like you're talking to, are going to go away or at a conference or whatever. In fact, I scheduled our California trip at the same time that there was a End Hate conference down in Florida, where everybody that was in my movie was going to. And so we had to work around that. And it worked out and we got everybody. It was fine. So you want to make sure that the people you want to interview are going to be available. A 2-month buffer between your initial conversation and setting up your interview should give you a pretty good field of availability. And what I do is I take the person that's the most important. So, like, whoever you got that is either the most famous, the most outspoken, it's going to be your top interview. Schedule them first, and then schedule your other stuff around them. So you have your window of, okay, they're available the second week in March. Okay, so we're going to get them, and now we're going to start scheduling everybody else around those 3 weeks in March, and get it done. That's the only way to do this without losing your mind. Now, some people are going to tell you, yeah, I would love to be in your film, but I'm literally finishing a book right now. Can you get back to me in the spring? And that happened to me on After Never Again with a very famous writer who I really wanted in my film. So we did. I left her alone, and then in April we reconvened. I went down and got an amazing interview with her in New Jersey. Bing, bang, boom, it was done. So that kind of happens. But do the best you can to schedule your interviews together. It saves money, it saves time, and you'll save yourself a lot of what we call service in Yiddish. So the scheduling part is important because obviously that's going to affect your budget. And once you are sort of scheduled and you know where you're going and who you're going and what the gas is going to cost, you have to figure gas in everything and food because you're going to eat, whether you think you are or not. I literally schedule $50 a day for food no matter where I go, even if it's a one-day trip, because you're going to eat, and that's an expense. All of these are expenses in your budget, which is why in your $5,000 budget, your biggest expense is going to be travel. You'll be able to, there'll be a link to my book at the end of this, so you can look at Documentary Film 101, which has got formulas for figuring out gas and food and everything like that. But you need to figure gas by the mile, and you need to figure food in your travels. So all that's going to be part of your budget. And the other part of that is gear, and that's in there too. And we will talk about gear. Probably the next episode we'll talk about what you need and what you don't need. But suffice to say, you will need gear. So that's going to go into your budget also. So, but you need to figure out how many days you're shooting on this film. If you're interviewing like 40 people, like I am, and I'm on day 31, well, yeah. But like, when I did Rescue Brooklyn, which was my first documentary, I followed Sean around for 2 years. I had no idea it was going to take that long. I had 150 hours of footage, which, by the way, I had not labeled. And it was all shot on mini DV tapes. No, it wasn't. It was shot on flashcards. Sorry. We got rid of the mini DV tape camera at the beginning of the shoot. Little flashcards that went into Final Cut, I think, 7 at the time. And it had all the little bins. So me and my assistant spent 2.5 weeks labeling everything. That's 2.5 weeks of my life I'll never get back. So the lesson is label all your footage as soon as you shoot it, because don't be me. So that's part of what you're thinking about with regards to time. So if you are done, if you've got 3 weeks of the shoot, then you're going to schedule 3 weeks of the shoot. If it's 4 weeks, then give yourself 4 weeks of getting it done. Because once it's done, you can't go, you can go back, obviously, but hopefully you've gotten everything you need. So then, once you know those numbers and you know how long this is going to take and where you got to drive to, if you're paying for things, which you shouldn't be, don't pay for things. And by the way, you're not paying anybody else either. This is why it's a one-man band, because you don't have to pay yourself and you can make a movie. The minute you start bringing other people in, people need to get paid. I feel very strongly about that. So, one-man bandit, you're good. Do everything yourself. So, pre-production is schedule and your budget. So, now you've got your schedule. Then look at your budget. And basically, anything that is not going to be on screen, get rid of it. Okay? If it's not going to move the movie forward, you don't need it. You don't need a gimbal. You don't need special gear. You don't need a camera that's going to shoot 9000K or is open gate, or you don't need float audio. You need a good microphone and a decent camera. And let me tell you why you need a decent camera. Because even though I shoot, I got my Canon C300 Mark II, which I love, and I talk about it all the time. Shoots 4K, whatever. And Outcast Nation was shot in 24 FP 4K. PBS delivery is 1080. Okay? Broadcast quality 1080 is what they want. So you do not need a camera that shoots 6K or 12K or open or any of this, or Kodak. This I shoot Canon C-Log 3, and that's it. So you need a decent camera. You need a really good microphone, because a crappy film with good sound is going to get watched. A crappy film with good video and bad sound is not going to get watched. So that's where you want to put your money. And then everything else is in travel. So if it's not going to be on the screen, don't spend it. You don't need toys. You need a camera, a microphone, and maybe one light. I shoot all my stuff with basically one key light and one backlight. And I was a lighting designer for almost 15 years, so I know lighting. Keep it simple. You want a small footprint, particularly if you're going into people's houses. You really, really don't want to intrude. You want to be there. You want the camera to be almost invisible. So that's we'll get into all that in another episode. But we're talking about budget and time and schedule. So that's it. Be frugal. If it's not going to be on the screen, then you don't need it. And then period. So once you have your schedule and your budget, well, then what's next? Making a movie. Yeah. So what comes next is actually the next step before the interview is reaching out to your interviewees and talking to them on Google. Okay, so the one thing I do before I ever roll camera is I have a Google meeting with every person I'm going to interview. And why do I do that? Well, firstly, because I want to talk to them and talk about the logistics of the shoot and all this stuff, but more, they want to get to know me, so they trust me with their story, and I want to get to know them, so I can see them on camera, I can see how they are. They can ask me questions about the shoot. I can talk to them about the things I'd like them to talk about, because I don't do question 1, where were you born? Question 2, where do you work? I don't do that. I basically tell them, look, you're in the film because of what you do, about what you're talking about, what you've written about, who you are. So basically, I'm going to turn the camera on and tell me what you do and talk about whatever the issue is that we're talking about. And I let them talk. And then I'll guide them and I'll ask them questions based on what they're talking about. But I don't do the question 1, question 2, question 3 thing. So when I talk to them, that's kind of what I convey when they want to know what questions I'm going to ask them. And I do give them the questions in advance. I mean, this idea of like surprise questions. I was on Reddit a couple of months ago, and somebody posed the question, do you give your questions to your subjects in advance? And almost to a person, everybody was like, of course. That's ethical filmmaking. Except one person, no, I like to see the look on their face when I ask the question. I was like, you're a schmuck. I'm sorry. This is a person who's never picked up a camera, has never interviewed a person. And if they have, they'll never interview anybody again. We don't do gotcha filmmaking. We don't do surprise. We don't want to see the look on their face when we give them a question. That they didn't want to answer. Be respectful. They didn't see coming, or they're not prepared to answer. We don't do that, okay? Only a schmuck would do that. And so this guy got railed. I didn't even have to say anything. Like everybody on that subreddit was like, "You're an idiot." So, but anyway, I do give them questions in advance, basically just to tell them that these are the things we want to talk about. So they're not so much questions as, I know that you worked on this or you wrote about this. Can you talk about it? And how does this thing relate to what your work and what you've been working on? So it's not a question and answer so much as a prompting for them to talk about their stuff. And it's a much more conversational style of filmmaking, and that's what I do. And that's what I suggest everybody does. Now, granted, your mileage may vary, but getting to know these people before you go to their house or their office and set up a camera in their face and go, okay, hey, talk to me now. It's much better. There are things about the internet that are good, the technology that's good. My first documentaries, I was unable to do that. You have emails and then you talk. Being able to face with somebody on Google before you show up at their house is gold. And I recommend that you do that for every person that you're going to interview, every organization that you're going to interview. Speak to the person in charge. Have a Google meeting. I'm telling you, it will make your on-site interview so much better, much more comfortable, and you will absolutely get more. You'll get more stuff that way than showing up cold. Because then you're going to need 15 minutes for this person to get used to you. Whereas once you've spoken to them and you're friendly, you hit the ground running. They know you're going to be there. You've already spoken. They know what you want them to talk about. So they've had weeks to think about what they want to talk about, how they want to talk about it. Also, and this is not to be undersold, when you talk to them, they're going to go, oh, you know what? You know who you should speak to? You should speak to this person. Or you should speak to the person that I'm writing a book with. You should speak to this organization. I'll hook you up. That's what happens when you do face-to-face meetings on Google. When you do an email and just show up, you don't get any of that. You get an interview that's half-assed and not nearly what it could be. You're asking these people to let you look into their lives. And some of these people, like on Outcast Nation, you're talking to them about like the worst moments in their life. Have some respect. Talk to them in advance. And on Outcast Nation, I spoke to everybody in advance. That was no joke. We had meetings, we had talks before we rolled a frame. And even when I met them for the first time, we talked for an hour before I even turned the camera on. Be respectful of the people that you're talking to, and I promise you, you will get that back tenfold. Having those conversations in advance will advance your film with other people, other connections, and a better interview, okay? So, take the time, be congenial? Maybe congenial. Be nice, be respectful of their time, and also, my God, don't show up and not know how to use your camera. Don't show up and take an hour to set up. Don't show up and track mud all over their house. And don't show up and ask to use their bathroom. Job number one. Pee before you get there. Pee afterwards. Do not ask people to use their bathroom. It's awkward. And they're going to say yes because they're not going to tell you not to use the bathroom. Just don't do it, okay? Just don't do it, okay? So you be respectful. Set it all up in advance. And I promise you the stuff that you will get will be paramount. So that's before you ever get to somebody's house. Then, when you get to their house, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so what happens when you do show up at somebody's house? And you're not an axe murderer. So let's talk about two scenarios, similar but different. So let's start with you're going to go interview somebody at their house. Okay, you've already talked to them. They got a wonderful studio. They got an office with a library. I always try to find a room with books because bookshelves is a great background. It breaks up the back. It looks studious. If they're a writer, it looks great. It's a great background. Maybe near a window, so you've got a motivational light. And sometimes you don't even need a light if the lighting is good. So, and you've spoken to them in advance, right? You've done your thing, you've spoken to them, so you know where you're going to set up. They're going to point you to that place. Sometimes if it's somebody who's really media savvy and has done a lot of interviews, they'll say, oh, by the way, this is where they like to shoot when they come over. And usually it's a good spot. Like if CNN has been there, whatever, they usually find a good spot. Do that. if they have a spot where they normally shoot, do that. But so you've spoken in advance, and so you show up to their house. Now, you are, if you're driving, whatever it is, make sure your shoes are clean. Wipe your feet. If they ask you to take off your shoes, just do it, okay? And what I do is I leave all the gear in the car. I knock on the door by myself. I walk in. Hi, how you doing? It's great to be here. What a lovely house you have. Because sometimes they are lovely houses. Just get comfortable. Okay, where do you think you want to do this? This is a nice place over here. This is a nice place over here. Find your place. And then basically tell them, okay, we're going to need about 15 minutes, and then, we'll get going. So, and with me, I've got it down to a science. I mean, I've got my Sack Pack Cube. Thank you, Sydney. Sack. I've got my one big Vibor case that's got the lighting and the tripod. I've got basically a backpack and a case. And I come in, I'll put the tripod where I think the interview is going to be, and I'll set up a chair so I have a line of sight, build out the camera, put it on the tripod, put up the lights, done. 15 minutes. You should not have these people waiting an hour for you to set up your gear. So, make sure that you've already set it up, everything works, all your batteries are charged, please. You have media to shoot on. You're prepared to shoot. Quite frankly, what I'll do, if it's a local thing, I'll build the camera at home. I'll build the camera at home, bring it with me, put it in the back seat on my Sack. We love the Sack. It's great. It's for shooting, but also carrying your camera in the car. Already built out. So now all I got to do is go in, put the tripod down, put the camera on top, a couple of lights, boom, done. You want to minimize the time that they're waiting for you, okay? Don't look unprofessional. If you can't figure out, if it takes you an hour to set up your camera, they will already have lost faith in you as a documentary filmmaker, okay? Never make them wait. And also, once you're done, unless they're talking to you, get the hell out of there. Don't make conversation. Now, very often they will. Like I have spoken to people and been like, oh, and then occasionally I'll turn the camera back on because the conversation gets good. And we'll get into that whole thing in a second. But be professional, be prepared, and be ready. 15 minutes is the most that you can let anybody wait for an interview in their house, okay? It's their house. There may be other family members there who have to be quiet, during this interview. Get in, get out. Most of my interviews don't take more than 40 minutes, and that's what I tell people how long it's going to take. And it's somewhere between 40 and an hour, and then I'm out of there. So be respectful of their time. But on top of that, when you're doing your interview, and once they're comfortable with you, and you've asked all your questions, they've answered all your questions, inevitably there will be more. So you do not turn off the camera until you've decided that they're going to get up and go into the kitchen or whatever. Then you can turn off the camera, because the best stuff is going to come after you're done with the official interview. And trust me, across 6 documentaries, that's never not been the case. Some of the best stuff I got was after the interview, because now they're comfortable with you, and now they're remembering things that they want to talk about. And I always ask, the last thing I ask is there anything else you want to add for the film? Is there anything, anything in your head you want to add? And that usually opens up a floodgate of stuff. So you don't turn the camera off until they are really, really done. So pack your stuff, and then the 2 things you leave them with. A, thank you for the interview. If I need more stuff, can I come back? And normally they'll say yes. Also, you'll see this before anybody else does, before this gets released. And if you decide you want out of the film, I'll take you out. No questions asked, okay? That's what we do. That is ethical filmmaking. That is how we do things. If somebody doesn't want to be in your film, then they're not in your film. And you give them the opportunity to watch it, the whole movie, and their participation before it goes out on YouTube, before it goes to a distributor, or for me, for PBS. Everybody gets to watch it and sign off on it before before a frame is shown anywhere else. And that way, they trust you, and they know that you're not going to gotcha them because if you do cut up their stuff, they can just say no. So, and we don't do that anyway. That's not something that we do. And when we get to the edit episode, we'll talk about ethical editing, but that's not now. Actually, there's going to be an entire podcast episode just about ethics in filmmaking. I feel very strongly about that stuff. But anyway, you're going to leave them on a good note, and you're going to go home, and we'll talk about what happens when you go home, but I'll tell you what happens when you go home first. You take that stuff, that media that you just shot, and you back that up to a hard drive. You back that up to a computer, and you back that up to the cloud. 3 places. You want 3 redundancies for that footage, because if something bad happens, like, I don't know, somebody breaks into your house and steals all your gear, including your computer, you will be screwed. So you back it up 3 different places. And I'm not saying that happened to me. I'm saying it could have almost happened to me. They did steal all our gear on Outcast Nation, but they didn't take my big computer over here, so we didn't lose any footage, but we could have. So as soon as you come home, you back it up, cloud, hard drive, and a separate hard drive. I have a NAS now, so everything goes on the NAS when I'm traveling. It's taken 6 documentaries to get there, but hey, I'm there now. And we'll probably do a whole podcast about the NAS and my whole post-production workflow, but that's not today. So you go home, you dump all the footage, and then you take a shower, you take a nap, and then you go out and eat dinner, or you go to sleep, or do whatever it is that you choose to do at the end of the day. So that's if you go to somebody's house. Let's talk about somebody's office or school or classroom. This is a whole other thing, because now you're dealing with institutions. So you need to make sure that the person that you're interviewing has cleared the interview with whatever department they're in, or wherever you're going. Also, and this is not to be understated, parking. Okay, make sure that you can find parking, because you got all this gear. You don't want to walk 37 blocks to get to your interview. Or when I was in Michigan and I went to Michigan State to interview a professor for After and Ever Again, her classroom was in one building. And universities, you can't park anywhere. They will tow your ass right away. So the parking was literally in the stadium parking lot. So I made it to Michigan State. Yesterday it was 70 degrees. Today it is 50. I'm freezing my ass off. And I had to park the car in a lot well away from Amy's office, but we dropped off the gear, got it upstairs, so I just had to have a long walk from the parking lot. But it's all good. I'm going to get a great interview. There's actually a charging station right here on campus, so we'll get that done before we go back to the hotel. An hour ride, and then hot tub. Yes. Another great interview. I am done here in Michigan. I am walking through a very long parking lot all the way over there. But another amazing interview. More than I could have hoped for. I think every interview I have done so far has been more than I could hope for. So, all good. Hot tub in my future, then dinner, then on the road first thing in the morning, back to Brooklyn. See ya. Make sure you sorted out parking for wherever it is before you get there, because parking is a bitch. Shooting Outcast Nation in New York City was there was a lot of money spent on parking garages. I can just tell you that was our biggest expense. That and food. Parking it's going to be a thing. Gas is going to be a thing. So figure it all out in advance. So you go into somebody's classroom. Classrooms sometimes are good, sometimes they're not. This is where you might want to bring some lighting, because like industrial lighting is kind of crappy. So you bring 1 or 2 good lights, and that way you can turn the lights off and get a decent shot. And to me, I like to position them like behind their desk or in front of the library books. Like with Amy Simon, we did her very small office, but I positioned her in front of her library with a little practical. I used the 35 millimeter, the Infinity Cineprimes that I have, because the distance, the 35 millimeter was the best for the shot. And we'll get into lenses and everything another time when we do gear. But, you make it work. But, you're respectful. You're in somebody's office. You're where they work. Okay? Don't be a jerk-off. Show up on time. Okay? Be respectful. If there's students around, don't act like a jerk. Be nice, be respectful, and people will help you. And particularly with professors, man, professors will hook you up with so many other people because they all know it. Within a particular forum, they all know each other. and they'll be like, oh, what would be great for that? Oh, you should really talk to this person because their specialty is this. You make those relationships and you don't screw that up, you're golden. If you're a jerk-off, they'll make sure that you speak to nobody. Because, again, it's a very, very small world. I had just recently, I had somebody that I'm working with who was working with somebody else. And who basically got screwed. This person was working with them for a year. A full year. Following her organization around. And they were supposed to be making a documentary with them involved that was going to be on PBS. I think it was PBS. And they were getting a grant from the Endowment for Humanities. And at the end of the day, this person bailed on my person because the grant people told her that some of her political beliefs were not acceptable for their money. So she bailed on my friend and basically took the money. I'm not going to get into it, but to me, that's rather unethical. And that person is now kind of blacklisted. Again, no names, but they know who they are. Don't do that. You follow somebody around for a year, you shoot footage for a year, and then bail on them because these people won't give you money? Are you out of your mind? That's not what we do. And again, we'll get into ethical filmmaking and a whole other... That's a whole podcast worth of stuff. But if you are a jerk-off in the documentary world, your name will get around, and people will not talk to you, particularly when you start reaching out to people. I mean, academics are a small world, They'll be like, okay, this was your last movie? Who'd you speak to? Oh, okay. I'll reach out to them. Trust me. It's better to be nice. It's better to be respectful, and be a person of your word. And to me, that's just being human. So when you're at like a university, or you're at some kind of business, or if you're at a conference. I mean, conferences are big in the documentary world. I've done conferences on almost every film I've made. I was just at a big conference at the Javits Center a couple of weeks ago, and if you are nice and you work with people, they will hook you up with the right people to talk to. I got serious famous people to be in my movie last minute at this conference because I was working with the people who ran the conference and they wanted to help me with my movie. I had people coming over to me, sitting down going, oh, can I be in the film? I'd love to talk to you. That only happens if you have a reputation of being an ethical, good filmmaker. Not good as in you make a good movie, but in a good person, because then people will talk about you and they'll be like, you know what? If they ask you, yes, you want to work with this person, as opposed to you do not want to work with this person. Now, good movie, bad movie, that's not really what we're talking about. Being a good person, being a good filmmaker, that's what we're talking about. So when you're going to people's places of work or their houses, you're entering their world, okay? Their world, they're letting you in, they're giving you access to their world. Respect it, okay? Don't trod on their world. And to me, that's it. That's your development, that's your pre-production, and that's your interview sort of philosophy, okay? I think that's enough. I hope you like this podcast. This was the plan to sort of get us to the next step of like gear and production and just, talking about, really what it is to be a one-man band documentary filmmaker. And we'll get more into that in the next podcast, I think, because there's a whole lot more to talk about, sort of in just doing this by yourself and what that means and what that's like and being alone for a lot of this, because one-man band documentary filmmaking can be very solitary. But anyway, hope you liked it. You can see this will be on Spotify, this will be on Apple Podcast, and it'll be on YouTube Podcast, and you'll be able to see me. And that's it. As we say on my my YouTube channel, keep filming. Bye. Welcome to A Documentary Life was produced by Charlie Spickler, written and directed by Charlie Spickler, all rights reserved, Real Brooklyn Films 2026. For more information about the podcast, go to www.realbrooklynfilms.net.